Hello, Netroots Nation. Welcome to 2020 welcome to presidential findings from the 2020 election. We have an amazing panel today with staffers who covered breadth of positions for Kamala, Beto, Booker, Buttigieg, Warren, and we're very excited to get this kicked off. Bear with us as this is our first all virtual panel of the cycle. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to go through some quick intros for folks on the team. I'll be asking the panelists some questions, and then in the last 15 minutes, we're going to open it up to Q&A from the audience. There are some instructions in the chat box about how to use Q&A if you have questions, and I'll be fielding those questions for our amazing group of panelists. I'm Catherine Algeri. I was Senior Digital Advisor for the Kamala for the People presidential campaign. And one of the things that inspired this panel to come together was because when you're on a presidential campaign and you're seeing all of your peers do these really amazing things and you can't talk to each other about it, especially when you're friends with these folks, it gets you thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could all talk to each other about it? And that's what this panel today is designed a little bit to do, and to help you all with your digital work and get inspired by some of these amazing folks the way I have. So without further ado, we have Shelby Cole, who was the digital director for Kamala Harris for the People. We have, I'm just going in order of the boxes on my screen, so bear with me. Stefan Smith, who was the digital engagement director for Pete for America. We have Vishal Disawar, who was the innovation manager for Warren for President. We have Masha Anderson, who was the email director for Corey 2020. We have Benjy Messner, the data analytics director for Beto. And we have Jose Nunez, who was the digital organizing director for Kamala and is now in a similar role on the Biden campaign. All right, so what I would like for folks to do is, and I'm gonna put Shelby on the spot first, is talk a little bit about your role on the presidential campaign. And then if you could share a couple of innovations or experiences that you thought were really noteworthy that folks at Netroots could benefit from.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Shelby. Really excited that Kamala Harris got picked to be our next VP. I think that it's been just incredible watching the kind of groundswell of support for her over the past, 24 or 36 hours. And as is evidenced by all the money that they raised, I think people are really fired up about her. So I'm just really excited to see the country fall in love with the candidate that, I worked for last cycle or this cycle. So I think in the realm of innovation, I don't know if I will have the most interesting things to share because our team was incredibly small for a good portion of the campaign. For budgetary reasons, we just had a small team and then outsourced, or worked with vendors and partners to do a lot of the work. So I'll say that we did the boring and unsexy work of just optimizing our day-to-day workflow to make sure that we could get as much done as needed to get done on a presidential scale with a team of, we had one person, Alicia Oken, who was running social single-handedly for a very long period of time. She got some help towards the tail end. We had a 2-person email team, which I would stake my life is, the smallest email team of any presidential campaign that was, in the top tier. God bless those people, Terica and Kyle. They typed until their knuckles bled and just did not sleep. So I think that really it was just focusing on making sure that every single aspect of the work that we were doing was optimized until towards the end when we finally were able to scale up and staff up in a way that was significant.
Great. And Stefan, do you want to go next?
I mean, following Shelby is always my worst fear in life. Hi everyone, I'm Stefan Smith, and on Pete's campaign, I got there employee 17. I got there like real quick, real early. And started out as their creative content manager working under Bridget Halligan and Alok Kanani, and then became deputy platforms director, which was mostly in charge of working on our video content, and so video platforms and vertical video. And then after we noticed we needed a little bit of help in our online engagement space, became online engagement director, really working with #Team Pete, really working with our Pete stands to figure out, can we build an organizational model online that sort of fills in some of the holes we were seeing on Pete's campaign. Like Shelby said, like in terms of like staffing, Pete's campaign was super small for most of the campaign up until like August or September. Our email team was 3 people, or 2 or 3 people. And it was still mostly Bridget writing it. So I totally get, like, you have to be, for at least us, it was scrappiness, but it was also just, how do we reinvent this process and what this looks like, considering the moment we're in. We had a very, very interesting and unique candidate in Pete Buttigieg because, you know, he's a 39-year-old millennial gay mayor from the 4th largest city in Indiana that nobody had heard of unless you had seen, I don't know, a Notre Dame movie. I don't know. So there was a lot of work to like do. And I think in terms of innovations and things I'm super proud of, it comes on the content side and on the online engagement side. On the content side, we were really focused on building community and building belonging through content. So how can you sort of strip the veneer down, get as close to Pete as humanly possible, be as authentic as possible, even if it means being a little bit corny? I know, I see your memes. I saw you dragging us, and it was a strategic decision, and we won Iowa, so be salty. Anyway, no. So like, how can we be as authentic and, you know, not as close to the people as humanly possible? So that was on one side. The other part of it was, what do you do, or how do you deal when you have an extremely hostile online environment for your candidate? So I don't think anybody will be completely shocked here to learn that the internet is not a huge fan of Pete Buttigieg. Twitter is not Pete's playground. And so how do you build community, build belonging, empower supporters, and sort of not, I hate the idea of a digital army. If I hear digital army one more time, I'm gonna like throw myself from a fucking building. Sorry, language. But how do you empower supporters to defend your candidate and take their message more places? So that was a lot of where I focused on my work, especially at the tail end of the campaign.
All right, Vishal, take it away.
Hey y'all, Vishal. As Catherine mentioned, I was on the grassroots mobilization team on Team Warren as the innovation manager. And previously before then, I was the product manager at Mobilize America. So I think that the reason why that's relevant is because my work really consisted of sort of, you know, everyone on our team had an innovative like culture, wanting to try out new things. And I think my role was to really help us help realize some of our creative ideas, as well as just helping us sort of scale our programs using our tech tools, from communities to email to distributed to our states team. So working with our internal tech team and our vendors to really make sure we can create tools and features that will really help us try out new things and scale our programs, and also make our experience for our volunteers a lot more smooth. And I think, you know, one of the unique things about the learnings that I've come across is, I think, you know, we had a large staff footprint across many states with organizers. And so one of the focus of like the tools that we had to think through was what can we do to make their work operationally much easier so they could do the day-to-day work of being able to talk to more voters and build more tighter connections with their volunteers without having to do, you know, mundane tasks that like really take away from that work. And then, you know, as well as like a large like distributed volunteer base that we have to figure out, how can we help, you know, our distributed volunteers learn as much as possible without having to have, you know, hand-holding from like every individual staff member, and make sure we can get them plugged in as easy as possible, like quickly as possible into our various texting, relational, and dialer programs. So there's a lot of experimentation and building tools around that vein to help optimize that process. So all in all, it was a fun experience.
All right, Masha.
Hi, I'm Masha. I was the one running Cory Booker's email program. I think something I can relate to a lot of us on this call is we were scrappy as can be, and corny in a way. A dad joke is corny. But I think something for us is we had a digital first, digital native candidate. Like Cory Booker was on Twitter before I was on Twitter. Like Cory Booker would just talk to supporters when he was mayor. He, you know, if you've seen it, he would like tweet at people in snowstorms. He'd be like, "What do you need? I'm gonna go to the store. I'm gonna come to you. I'm gonna shovel, you know, the snow out of your driveway." And so he was always this digital first in a social media way, but that doesn't always translate to an email list, you know, an ads program, an SMS list. And so I came on and it was kind of like, we don't have that same infrastructure, you know, you'll see on his like Twitter following. And so it was like, how do we create that, qualify for the debates? And at the same time, not, you know, burn down our email program. And so we really leaned heavily on our analytics team, creating a frequency model and working with them on like, how do we make sure we're not over emailing or under emailing? We're still able to push out his message, raise money without, you know, having the issue of can we keep going at a certain frequency without burning a list? And like, could that get us to Iowa, basically? And so my scrappy team of myself and two of the most fantastic people I've ever worked with, and then our friends at Do Big Things, we made sure we could do that as best as we can, and mainly staying true to Cory Booker in every way we can, how you could insert a dad joke, you know, SoundCloud a tweet or two, trying to basically make the debate stages, get Cory Booker's message across, and have fun with it at the same time.
Awesome. We'll circle back to that frequency model for email. All right, Benjy.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. Benjy Messner. I was the Director of Data and Analytics for Beto's campaign. I'm a little different from everyone else here in that my role was not primarily digital, but worked a lot with our digital folks and in a past life with Catherine. You know, I have the same thing to say as everyone. We had a small team. It was smaller than we wanted. You know, we couldn't do everything. You know, I think that's the unfortunate nature of a 15 to 90 candidate field. You know, it felt some days like there were more people running for president than there were voters, right? But you know, we also, I think, as some other folks have said, had a candidate who was almost too comfortable with digital. I'm sure everyone follows Beto on Instagram, and you know, he shares a lot, and I think a lot of it is really good content. But you know, it wasn't always the content that we were hoping for, right? In terms of, you know, talking to voters in early states or stuff like that. And, you know, we had a lot of stands, I guess they're called. That term is somewhat new to me, you know, helping sort of guide their efforts and bringing them into the work was something that was really new for me. And I think we were able to do a lot with that and really communicate with folks, even though, of course, ultimately we didn't make it all the way.
Nice. All right, Jose.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jose. I'm was the digital organizing director on the Kamala campaign, as Catherine noted. I think, like everyone else noted, I think what we tried to do on the Kamala campaign, though, that I think was a little bit more innovative, and I'll start with the organization structure. So within our campaign from the beginning, digital organizing was its own vertical, meaning that we did not sit directly under the digital proper, under Shelby's department. We also didn't sit directly under the organizing department. So we were one with each of those teams. It allowed my team to be nimble. It allowed us to have cross-departmental functions that just made sense. So whether that be something that we really kept a close hold to for mobilizing our supporters, for example, was our broadcast SMS program. At the end of the day, more than 50% of all of our shifts that came through our events came from our broadcast program. I would say that our broadcast program was also a huge source just for volunteer recruitment engagement, more so than it was for our fundraising efforts. And there was always like a fine line between how much fundraising are we doing through our broadcast program versus organizing, I would say at the end of the day, better or for worse, it was one of our strongest organizing tools on the campaign. Number two, when we came into the campaign as well, we knew rather than trying to ramp something up where we thought, okay, we're going to have X number of staff across all of our primary states, we knew that we had to really rethink how we empowered our volunteers to take core functions of the campaign. And that went from everything from being able to talk to voters through all of our platforms, whether they're organizing their own communities, online spaces, offline, but also even some functions of like running ops on the team and helping our ops team do small functions of the campaign. The things that we did, the most innovative things were just handing off functions of the campaign to a volunteer and really trusting them and empowering them. Because at the end of the day, they are the organizers, and we really try to flip it on its head on how much a volunteer can really do on behalf of the campaign. So I think that was really innovative for us. And I would say the very last thing here, with the limited amount of staff that we had, the volunteers that were really hungry, and I think even from the last couple of days, we've seen that there's a real combo effect in terms of support. There were a lot of people that just wanted to do a lot of things, and we really had to decentralize that in a way that wasn't facilitating in the simple aspects of training in person. So it was really not just myself, it was Anatole Jenkins and some other folks on the team that just sat down. We had a Google Doc and we were like, how the hell are we going to train tens of thousands of people all virtually and make sure that they feel comfortable and ready to go and go start organizing people in their own communities everywhere. So we launched Camp Kamala. It was literally in like a 2-week span. It was a training program that really wasn't even facilitated by, there was really limited surrogates that we had come in. It was really just led by the organizing team. And the reason that we think it was successful and something that we tried to do on the front end was really make sure that the volunteers feel like they own a piece of the program. So this is not just, here's how you send text, here's how you make calls. It's really about keeping them looped into, look, this is the pathway to victory and this is how you're gonna help us win, right? Giving them updates in a meaningful way and making sure that at the end of the campaign, to this day, we built infrastructure that supported them to organize going forward, and that will last past this election cycle. So I would say we really built an incredible organizing infrastructure, and it's been really beautiful to see. And I'm sure other campaigns can speak to this, since we all had volunteer empowerment models in some ways. These folks are just organizing every single day, even after candidates dropped out. And it was just, it's beautiful to see. So yeah.
Amazing. All right, so that's actually going to segue into something that I hope even in this Zoom environment can be a little bit more conversational. I'm going to put out a question to the panel, and you can all decide who gets to answer first. When you were out there on the campaign trail, what was something that you saw another campaign doing that you were like, oh my gosh, I'm so jealous, or I wish I could ask about it? All right, I see Shelby got her hand raised, and then we'll go to Stefan.
Ooh, I've been waiting. So I want to ask, of course, there were a lot of campaigns that did so much dope and innovative stuff this cycle. The program that I'm most interested to learn about and see a little bit under the hood, if Vishal will indulge me, is I would love to learn more, what you can share about what it was like building your entire operation, including paid media, in-house. I don't think that that's ever been done before in a campaign, at least on the Democratic side. So I'd love to hear like what that was like, how that improved your life or made it more difficult, and then like your role in all of that.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, I think having the paid media team in-house, and I can like also talk on behalf of some of my coworkers who like loved this experience, is that it just made collaboration a lot more easier. And, you know, a lot of the times the paid media team would like, you know, want to think about how their work can really help, you know, the organizers in Iowa get more leads quicker, and make sure, you know, they're targeting and like focusing on a lot of the organizing principles that we wanted them to focus on as well. You know, I don't think I personally like ended up interacting in my own work that much with the paid media team. I think, you know, a lot of our tech was like mostly working with like organizing technology and vendors in that space, but kind of just like knowing from, you know, some of the tools, you know, one place where like it was actually really beneficial, like with these tools that we're building and launching, was that we could, you know, strategize together with the paid media team, just like by sitting there with them, and they were really open to talking with us about how they can, you know, target these tools, which audience would be beneficial to like, you know, have these tools targeted to, and sort of also like work together to sort of like, you know, think through how to like track the analytics for these tools. Some of the ones that like we really focused on were our commit to caucus and commit to vote forms, as well as we launched like a calls page to get more distributed volunteers. So it's really helpful to kind of work with them to launch those pages.
All right, Stefan, I saw you had your hand raised. But you're
as I totally, of course, am on mute because I'm super pumped. And I also have the worst first world problem in the world, which is whenever I get animated, my AirPods fall out of my ear, which I'm calling racism because I'm just saying, I don't know why, but I'm doing it. No, I literally have so many questions. I think I'm super curious about candidate access. So when we're talking about the Booker campaign, for instance, everyone knows that like he is super digitally native and super digitally savvy, and like that's his thing. I'm thinking also about Beto. There's an Instagram live Beto did during the campaign. Literally just, we're in the middle. It's like, he should be talking about Iowa or whatever. It's him in Texas, and he's like walking around with his phone, taking pictures of ducks. And I literally was like, what's the message here? What are we doing here? I was like, so I guess my curious is like, how did the candidates' natural propensity for digital, how do you plan for that? How do you build structures around that, channels that in ways that are productive, I guess? And then how do you leave space in, the best laid plans of all digital people? How do we leave space in our plans for our candidate to riff and be himself? Or herself, sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Benjy.
Yeah, thanks. Just, Stefan, obviously the ducks were an interesting moment for us. To me, I think there are two sort of takeaways from there, right? Like, one is, at the end of the day, if you are measuring it from a strictly like, are more Iowans going to be inclined to caucus for Beto because of this perspective? Like, I don't think anyone on this call, panelist or attendee, is going to say that that was the most persuasive message that we moved on our time on the campaign.
There's a lot of duck enthusiasts, sir. Okay, let's not, I don't want to be agitating we've got 94 people in here. Somebody in this room is a duck enthusiast, so.
For sure, and if you extrapolate from that, I think we maybe got 2 additional caucus goers in Iowa, right? So not an efficient way to move people at scale. But, to me, one of the things that I really liked about Beto in the first place, and I promise I'm going more general with this is not just a Beto point, was just that like there was some authenticity that came through in his postings. And I think the same is true for Senator Booker, right? Like, it always felt to me like he was really there responding to stuff, which, Masha, of course, you would know much better than I. But to me, that was actually the most important thing that I thought was getting communicated, was the like basic humanity of some of these, I mean, of all of our Democratic candidates, of course, but, it was doing it in a way that brought people in. And in my mind, if you're thinking about it as I usually do from like a scoring perspective, like you're softening them up for the inevitable persuasion. And that to me was something that I thought was, one, just an interesting way to go about it, but also 2, a really crucial sort of strategic decision in a world where there were so many candidates. Like, at the end of the day, there was sort of a basic interest threshold that I felt like everyone had to meet. And to bring this back to the ducks, like, to me, that was a good way to sort of get people in there. Another Beto example, he Instagrammed his dentist visit, which I'm sure many people on this call have thoughts on. Of course, he was sharing the dentist story, but leaving aside how that got reported, it also, I think was very humanizing in that way. And I think a lot of the other candidates whose folks are represented here did similar things. But to me, it was just, sort of we had not had such a brutal primary fight as a party, depending on how you define it, in decades, right? And so it's just sort of necessary to go back to a style and strategy of campaigning that I think we hadn't seen in a while.
All right, Masha, do you want to chime in too?
Yeah, I don't want to, of course, speak for the senator, but I think something we were really fortunate to also have in our campaign is we had digital buy-in from the top very early on. Like, Jenna Lowenstein comes from digital. She was one of our deputy campaign managers. Our campaign manager, Dusu, was great. And like, if you don't follow him on Twitter, I think you should. But he was just somebody who like he was into it. He would go live with Corey. He would go live walking to the office during, our 1.7 push. It was something that it was very natural and easy to show, like, yes, like Corey has always been a digitally first person, and it's something that it doesn't make him uncomfortable, or at least, I can't tell. He's somebody who you could just say, can you talk about an issue? And so on the weekends he would go live, sometimes talking about, whatever he was doing that weekend. He would talk about the issues. The other thing is, like, he was somebody who was so comfortable in himself and in his own skin, like, where, he had dad jokes, and like we were able to own that, and like to the point where we put, a tweet of his that he tweeted a couple times on a mug about coffee, which I actually have today. But I think we lucked out with that candidate because he understands that talking directly to people is how you touch people with their stories, with your story, just being able to like be with them, because you can't meet everybody. And so I think that's the biggest thing I would say, is just we really lucked out with our candidate, and then being able to have our team be like, yeah, what do you need? Like, how do we do it? Where do we go live? What does he need to film? Like, Corey loves to take a selfie. Why don't we do some selfie videos? So it was really great to have on our team.
All right, does anyone else have any burning cues for your fellow presidential campaigners?
I mean, I have 900 questions. I want to talk about Camp Kamala. I want to talk about... I
want to see if Jose or Vishal or Benjy or Masha have a question.
Yeah, I have a question for Vishal again. I think on y'all's, the mobilization program obviously scaled to a size that I mean, a lot of campaigns would be very happy to have. What was some of the innovation that y'all were doing on the tech infrastructure side? What would you say was like the pipeline that you built on the campaign that was the most influential to bring in volunteers and get them out actually organizing in the easiest way possible? What I mean by that is, was it your community team? Was it your text program? Was it like, what exactly was really the most influential piece to y'all's program to be efficient and effective?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think that the way that I sort of think about it is like from a end-to-end sort of funnel of taking all this energy and support and sort of thinking about like, hey, where does this first start? Like when somebody gets really excited, where do they go to first? And so, the answer to most of that was, they'll go to the website and they'll say, I want to get involved. I have a lot of energy, but what do I do? So we wanted to make sure that there was a really effective and easy way for someone to say, okay, I want to start making phone calls, or I want to send texts. A lot of people did want to send texts, or I wanted to like start organizing locally in my community, or like volunteer with like if you're in a battleground state, like I need to, and yeah, that's all to do. If you're in a battleground state, we'll make you go canvas, or like if you were in a nearby a border state, we'll say, okay, cool. There's Iowa, caucus is next weekend. Can you go volunteer there? And I think we sort of wanted to first think about how do we match, like based on the person's interest and where they are, what is the most effective like ask we can give them? Kind of like thinking about, okay, how can we like, I don't know, emulate an organizer via like an online platform. And then from there, for example, with our calls and text program, the distributed team set up a like Slack, which is like the online field office for people, and essentially whenever people wanted to start texting, they would just respond, hey, like, send me, I want to start texting right away. And then, we would assign them a list, and then they would start texting right away. And like, the nice thing about the Slack community was that it allowed people to, engage with each other, and build community. And I think, people felt like it was a place they wanted to come back, and they made friends. And so it was an effective way for folks to then, stay plugged in, like an online field office, and then also start, getting involved with the work as well. And I think the other nice thing about that too, and we try to make this as robust as possible, is letting people, kind of compete with each other, and say, I've talked to these many people. One of the things like we would do with Reach, which was our relational program, was, have a leaderboard where people can say, oh, I've talked to these many people in my community, and sort of like have a competition with each other. People are motivated by that, which is interesting. And so, at the end of the day, it was just a lot about kind of emulating the organizer experience, showing them the best ask, and making sure, they continue to have like some sort of online community they continue coming back to. People come for the candidate and stay for the organizer sort of vibe.
All right, so I have a question for you, Shelby. Being Latinx, and being in digital campaigns for the last decade, I have been the only, person who looked like me in a lot of rooms over the years. What struck me about the Kamala digital team that you built was that it was the single most diverse work environment that I've ever been in. Could you share a little bit with folks how you approached that process and found these, and recruited these amazing people?
Yes, I would love to. I think that it is no secret to any person on this call or anyone watching that progressive campaigns it's a very white space, and it sucks, and it leaves out the diversity of the people that we seek to represent. And it is categorically a problem, and I feel very strongly that like we all need to be working overtime to fix it, and invite new people into the process, because that's the only way that we're going to get better and win more. So I think like a lot of people have asked this question, and my snarky response is just like, I simply hired people of color. But the real answer is like, it was a mandate from the senator. It was a mandate from her sister that our teams be diverse and inclusive. They just were like, this is a non-starter. You can't build an all-white team. So as a person who's worked in, on progressive campaigns and at lefty firms, the hiring pool, when you're trying to staff up and you're looking around and you're like, oh, everyone I know is white because everyone I've ever worked with is white, then you start to panic a little bit and you're like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Because I need to staff up, I need to scale. So I have to give a great amount of credit to Andrew, who was our director of online content. He came from a background he ran video at BuzzFeed. He invented BuzzFeed Tasty, which is pretty cool. He's a great person. He has a huge reach both online. He has a lot of followers on twitter.com, but he also has a different network from us. And my God, did we leverage that network. He basically tweeted out, looking to hire some video staff. And people were sending the tweet around to people who lived in Baltimore. So we were talking with people who lived in the community where the campaign was based about like, come be a part of this campaign. They're like, oh, I didn't even consider that I could have, just from seeing a tweet. So, I'll say that we were very intentional about it, but I'll also share that like, it is not easy. Like, it is easier to turn to your friends that from, campaigns past and just say, come on board. The hard thing to do, but the best thing to do is to actually be intentional, seek people out. And then I'll also say that like, there's a trick that Clark Humphrey, who was running the DNC's digital fundraising program and is now heading up Biden's, pardon my French, a fucking juggernaut of a digital fundraising program. Everyone go follow Clark on twitter.com. She is legendary. The tip that she has shared with us, like her secret technique, is she just goes onto LinkedIn. She paid for a premium account and she just stalks the hell out of people who have email in their bio on LinkedIn. And that'll open up a universe to you of people who have, worked at digital firms and you might not have heard of them, or people that work in, corporate email marketing who like have that background. And she just cold DMs people on LinkedIn. And I think Jose has been using that technique a little bit in his efforts to staff up his team on Biden. So I will say that like, it takes intentionality, and it takes people, checking their privilege and their bias at the door, and being aware that like, staffing up intentionally really, really matters, especially to a candidate like Kamala Harris.
And I would add one thing to that. I think that what was really interesting is that your team didn't restrict hiring to people who already had a foot in the political door. Like I think one of your, I think Jessica had a background, she was a reporter at Univision, and people who came from more traditionally commercial video spaces. And I think that's something that folks out there can talk about on their campaigns and with their folks, because there tends to be a bias if they didn't come from political. What can they know? And I'm segueing just a little bit before I get off my soapbox, but it's like, that's a bias that you also have to shut down if you don't want an all-white pool.
I'll also just really quickly on that, and then I will stop talking, is like that concern of like hiring someone from a not political background. I will say that it is like valid, because when you bring someone in from the outside world and they're on a presidential and they like hit the ground running, they hit a wall. So I think what we did is like miraculously, a lot of people started in the, you know, on the same week together. And we basically had a, you know, multi-hour, if not all day retreat for all the new hires of just being like, this is what a political department does. Like, I didn't want them to ever walk into a meeting where they felt confused or like they couldn't, like they were not allowed to understand what was happening. We made sure that like, these are all of the arms of the campaign. This is what field does. This is what jargon is. Like, you're gonna hear this shit. It's gonna be intimidating to you because you're new to the space, but like you are an expert in your field, and I refuse to let you feel like you are not welcome or like can't understand or keep up with the language. So we need to be less exclusive in that way.
Yay. All right. And then Stefan, I cut you off a little earlier when you were, if you want to give one more question to the crew, that would be.
Well, actually, if it's possible, can I speak on the diversity issue?
Oh, please. Yes. If anyone else wants to too.
Right. I mean, if I'm being completely honest and if I'm being self-reflective, I think I've made my career almost as the Black dude that white candidates hire to help them like very early on, because they're like, oh shit, oh my God, he's qualified. Oh shit, he's Black? Oh shit. And so I was maybe the 17th person hired on Pete's campaign. I was the third Black person. I was the only Black person. I was the only Black person hired, I think, for most of the entire campaign on the entire digital team at Pete. And that was not for lack of trying. I think what I would say on the inclusion thing is too many of us think, or too many, if I'm gonna be specific, too many white liberal progressives think that because they're not racist, that's enough. Not racist. That's enough. I've got the good intentions. I've got the best intentions. So it's nice if we get a person of color. It's great, fantastic, but we've got to scale quickly. This is a race. We've got to get to Iowa. We've got to go and move and run quickly. That creates massive problems later. And what I mean by that is, and again, I don't think I'm going to shock anybody on this campaign when we talk about Pete Buttigieg got tagged with a race issue during the primary, right? A lot of that wasn't the candidate. A lot of that, I think Pete's amazing, and his Douglas plan is probably the gold standard still in terms of intentional programs and policies meant to help redress sort of racist policies in America. I think because we didn't do a lot of it early and they didn't sort of think and empower that, one situation I'm gonna give that's an example is we were rolling out one of Pete's policies on national service, right? We're in the room, I'm the only Black person in the room. They're talking about the Peace Corps. They're talking about, oh, well, we can do this and this, oh my God, you know, so many people want to go into the Peace Corps and do, and I'm like, y'all, I grew up in public housing in South Carolina in an all Black neighborhood. Peace Corps is not on anybody's radar. I was like, in the meeting, I was like, how are we messaging this national service plan for communities of color? And someone in the room, non-Black, goes, this isn't about that. This is about national service. This isn't the Douglas plan. And I stop, and he caught himself as like, oh, that's kind of fucked up. A white ally called him out. And then it became a topic of conversation. But national service is one of Pete's plans, in my mind, didn't permeate communities of color as a thing that would help because it wasn't built in from the beginning on the messaging side. It wasn't until maybe, I want to say end of the year, December, October, or no, end of November, beginning of December, where I actually was able to pull everybody together and have a conversation about how do you do inclusive content. You have to show him listening. You can't just have a video of Black people cheering behind Pete and be like, see? And I'm like, no, that doesn't persuade Black people. That makes white people feel better about voting for a candidate. Like, that's not for Black people, that's for white people. Instead, Black people need to see him listening intently and not saying a fucking thing and show that he's in the community and he's there. That's step one. Step two is they need to show him explaining and talking through his policies and explaining how it would benefit. And then the third step is we can do rah-rah. cheerleading shit, Black people, like whatever. You can't jump immediately into the end. So I say all of that and put that on the table to say that investments early on in the program and in the process, especially when you're building something from scratch, pay massive dividends at the end, as well as underinvestment. So if you want to make sure you're not in a situation that sort of Pete was in towards the end, like, you have to do that work at the beginning. And if you don't do that work at the beginning, you cannot expect to succeed if you're not building programs that look like the people you want to represent. You're doomed almost from failure to the beginning. And you should take it from me. It's enough to win Iowa and get a close second in New Hampshire, but girl, it's not enough to be president. Sorry, that's tea. I don't know if that was too much.
I love it.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, you got to be real. Like,
yeah. So we're going to ask one more question to the panel before we kick it over to Q&A from the audience. And this, Stefan, segs really well into that question. You know, how did you all go about approaching your digital content for diverse audiences?
I think at the beginning, I was more on the platform side. So for me, it was about the small decisions you make when you run a social media program or when you're running on the content side of making sure it's not tokenism. I'm not talking like throw up a picture of the candidate with a Black person or et cetera. I'm saying like, how can you visually or in your copy or in the issues you're elevating? One of the best things I'm super proud of on Pete's campaign is when I was building out the daily content and going through approvals and doing that thing, I was always slipping in Indigenous stuff. I had just finished working in New Mexico. That for me was a community that gets very little love and attention from national politics. And so for me, Pete had one of the most robust vocal presences about issues happening on reservations and pueblos, because I just wanted, you have to do that work early. And so I think that's part of it. I think making sure you're lifting up voices and communities that your candidate may not be from. It's, I think, the most important thing you can do when you're building a program and you're thinking about inclusivity, especially if you have a white candidate or a male candidate, or God forbid both, is to think about how do you give this platform to people who perhaps otherwise wouldn't. And that could be it's something super small as like a heavy retweet strategy. That can be something heavily as like, how do we make sure that we're featuring? So for every policy rollout after the national service one, for every policy rollout after that, our video director, Carrie Gooch, made sure we had wonderful testimonials from the ground to go on our vertical platforms. So it's not Pete talking to you about the Douglas plan. It's not Pete talking to you about his plan for women or even the LGBTQ community. It's staffers, it's people and activists, it's organizers, it's people on the ground. The best thing sometimes you can do is recognize when your candidate may not be the best messenger for this policy. Give him or her the space to step away and feel confident enough in the programs you're running to give that space and platform over to others from that community. And that'll give you way more credibility, make sure you're way more covered, you'll reach way more people, and it'll come across as way more authentic.
Anyone else on the panel want to tackle that question? No? Okay, so we're gonna take a question from the audience. Shireen Mitchell asks, did any of your campaigns have a disinformation arm? If not, how did your team handle the disinformation about your candidates? And were there any concerns about digital voter suppression? I'll
let somebody else go, but yes, Pete had this because,
okay.
You know.
Great. Benjy, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had a really unfortunate disinformation problem, which was that after the El Paso shooting, which was just a little bit over a year ago, as some folks might remember, you know, there was some conversation going around on the darker corners of the internet that, you know, maybe this had been a, you know, false flag operation or whatever, that, you know, certain certain, Democrats maybe were connected with it in some way, which is of course a reprehensible thing to say. I want to give a really big shout out to the DNC actually for their help here. They had assembled, and still have, a really good disinfo team that was doing a lot of proactive monitoring on behalf of all of our candidates. And that's obviously a new thing that they have built out. And our folks working with their folks really had a great partnership around that when that happened. And we were able to sort of see it happening, respond when appropriate. And of course, you don't always want to, really sort of reinforce that kind of behavior and give it weight. But, to me, I think it's such a crucial thing. And I really just want to shout out the DNC for building that capacity out, because I think the tools and the people and everything that they were able to offer were really valuable. And to me, half of the battle here is just knowing that it's happening, right? I'm not a message person, and I think that's for the best. For those of you who know me, you probably agree. But, it just, having the visibility into it was a real game changer, because it just meant we could sort of adapt digitally and otherwise and respond or not respond as appropriate.
Cool. Vishal, do you guys have a disinformation arm?
So I think like the two things I know of like regarding disinformation was the social media team and the paid media team. I think back later in 2019, put out some like posts, did like a Facebook ad on Facebook that like had a lie about Zuckerberg, and it sort of like went through the review process, and like we sort of showed that as like a way of like how Facebook needs to update their policies to tackle disinformation better. So a huge shout out to them for like sort of kind of trying to like tackle the problem at the root cause. And sort of on the question around like digital voter suppression, we had a voter protection team that was built up of like making sure polls stayed open, or like they would be able to track like what polling locations were changed or not. And we ended up building our own polling locator tool and caucus locator tool as well on the team. So I had worked with our tech team to create a process with our voter protection team to identify what polling locations were changed, and then kind of like go through a quick vetting process to make sure we know what's the updated one to update it on the website. And at the same time, for people that we know, we were able to track like who had actually like looked up a polling location. So like if we had known that precinct location was changed, we would peer-to-peer text them, letting them know like what their was to look up their polling location again to make sure they're the most updated one. So like I think one of the learnings from there is like kind of like ensuring earlier on we're prepared and have a process set in place where we can move very quickly, but also at the same time not move so quickly where like we continue the disinformation of like for example where a polling location may be.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that there's disinformation on the polling front too. And then to Shireen's question, I think it's a little bit about disinformation about the candidate. Shelby, I think it would be fair to say for Kamala that we didn't have a targeted disinformation team, but that if we could go back in time, that's something that we probably would have really advocated that and suggest to folks out there in general, because we live in the brave new world where Russia is involved in our elections, of being like, okay, here are the folks on digital and comms and research who are going to work together to be the disinformation leads for this candidate. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I'll also say that like it's not that we I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I will say that we were monitoring it closely, and throughout the primary election campaign, she was, I believe, the most targeted candidate by Russian bots. And I just will give a massive plus to Benjy's note that the DNC love the team over there, think they're fabulous, and like they did and are doing a lot of work on this front. So I'm really grateful for that.
Okay, and then because we've been told that the Zoom will shut down this call 12:59 mid-sentence, and there's nothing we can do about it to extend it, I'm going to pull one of the other questions that's up there. So this is from an anonymous attendee. How did you all convert digital engagement to digital donations? What worked? What didn't? Go for it, Stefan.
I'm just going to go super quick. So post Iowa, post New Hampshire, basically anything you wanted to do on Pete's campaign that would bring in money, the answer was going to be a yes. Okay. So that meant we got to try these really amazing things that really tried, and I hate this word, to gamify the process. So for instance, we created this random website where it was a by $1 increments of $1 to $2,800, could we fill in the entire thing? And you would go and claim your digital spot at $15, $17. Oh no, somebody beat me to $15. I've got to give 20 now, whatever. That was amazing. We did Beard Edge in the last few, which was like a fundraising challenge to try and get Pete to grow a beard, which raised over $15,000 in a day. And it's just like, okay. It was really honestly about, so a lot of our email lists were donors. A lot of our donors were really hardcore Pete supporters because we had to build that list from scratch. What they wanted was to feel close and to be engaged. And so giving them exclusive content and making sure if you got your donation, you may get this thing, you may get access to this thing you may not otherwise have. Giving them things to do online. We had a wonderful sort of light up the map website where it's like, be the first person to donate and claim from this geography. So really making it fun. Like, yeah, we're taking your money. And like, girl, there's a way to make that seem tawdry and not nice, but like, we're taking your money. So like, let's hold your hand a little bit, you know, and make it a little bit easier. And we did, and we made it fun. And people on Team Pete, I've never seen groups of supporters so willingly hand over their money, and they did it because we made them feel a part of the program. So giving them something to invest in, giving them something fun that they haven't seen before, giving them exclusive content, making them feel like they're members or members of the team, and not just people who are writing checks or clicking an ActBlue link.
Yeah, I would love to talk about this one. So I think we had a lot of really great things that came out of our team on this. I think starting with 1.7, so we announced we needed to raise 1.7 to stay in the race. I remember that day, kind of. You know, our emails went out. We were sitting around waiting. We're like, is this gonna work? Is this not gonna work? And then the support that came out on Twitter, you know, the articles, the random celebrities who have never, you know, gotten involved in the 2020 presidential, and who were like, Cory Booker deserves to be in this race. And we started SoundClouding like crazy on Twitter. So for those who are like, what is she talking about? We dropped a donation, like an ActBlue link, on these like larger stories that we knew were going to pick up. And it's like, Cory Booker doesn't have SoundCloud, but he needs to raise $1.7 million to stay in the race. Can he donate? And it was things like that. It was, you know, we need to get 130,000 donors to make a debate stage. And it became this kind of fun thing that it wasn't just like me and my team doing. It was like our organizers were doing it. People who like didn't love doing Twitter on our campaign did it. Our supporters were doing it. A couple other things we were really excited to launch. We did an online donor wall. And so if you donate anything, you were automatically in a brick because our messaging was brick by brick on our website, and your name was there that you donated, that you were a part of this team. And then one last thing that was really exciting that I definitely chipped in for, Cory Booker had his tour bus in Iowa, and we wanted to do something special with the design. And so you could chip in any amount, and we would put a like little sticker of your name on our bus. Our team is great in Iowa, and our advanced team for hours and hours sticking like thousands of names on the tour bus, and it turned out really cool. And so we really tried to engage as much as we could with these grassroots donors.
Amazing. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. This one comes from Jennifer Dane. How did you use digital strategy to reach different generations? Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers, silent. All right, Benjy.
Non super digital person. To me, I think one thing that was really important for us was conceiving of digital as bigger than any one thing, which is I would imagine a point a lot of people would make. Our email program did not crush it among the Zoomers, not a huge shock, but obviously that was a tactic that was much more appropriate for some of our older audiences. And to me, that was a really interesting thing to see. You know, we did a lot of work on the data and analytics and on the strategy sides about like, who are we reaching where, you know, which of our supporters is where, how are they responding to us? And that was actually a really fun project to get to work through, to think about like, what's going to be best for what kind of platform, content-wise, message-wise, you know, very tactically. And, you know, I think that speaks to how important digital is, right? Because it's no longer one thing. It's not just fundraising. It's not just messaging, et cetera.
I think just to piggyback on that really quickly, this was something we tried really hard to do on Pete's campaign by being very platform specific and really trying to understand what was the audience on each platform that we were trying to reach and what messages would try and move them. So the ways in which we say to debate coverage on Twitter were completely different, even if the content was the same, than what we were doing on Snapchat or what we would do on Instagram story or even Facebook stories. Oh God. So it was really trying to think through what is the demographic profile of these platforms? What is the best way to tell Pete's story, which I think is really amazing and universal and could reach so many people, but it's gotta be tailored for the audience. So we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that every platform, including email and SMS, we were living up to our values, bringing the best of Pete and tailoring that for that platform specific audience.
All right, well, it's 12:57. So I just want to say thank you so much to our amazing panelists. If you guys could drop your Twitter handles in the chat so folks know where to follow you online for more amazing content, that would be appreciated. And then thank you everyone who stayed with us till the end of the call. And we will see you throughout the rest of this conference.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
All right.